you've got to listen, and then when you speak, you've got to press the transmit button, say your transmission, and then let go of it in order to give the other person a chance to actually respond to you. So that's you'll if you haven't had any experience with that at all, you'll grasp that pretty quickly, and once you start flying training. And the other limitation, and especially there's different types of radio communications for aircraft and boats and stuff, and the one we use in general aviation is VHF for very high frequency, and that actually, although you don't need to know this, but it covers 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz frequencies. And one of the things about one of the limitations is it's straight line communication, line of sight. It doesn't go around bends very well. So there's as you can see, it's given the height and the reception distance, which means it looks like the higher you are, the longer the range, basically. So that's kind of worth knowing in case you need to speak to someone. If you're kind of gliding, if you've gone somewhere, you're 50 miles away and you want to call back and say you're going to land out, you're probably not going to be heard at 1,000 feet. So and obviously if we were gliding, you're going to land out, you're not going to be able to voluntarily climb. So that you're stuck there, you'll just know that it's not worth spending a lot of time, or don't be kind of too shocked if you don't get a response. Maybe you can get relayed by someone else who's actually in the air at the time, can act as a relay station. So that's the limitation. Now, does anyone know what the reason for this is, apart from the strength of the signal? Why is it that why do you think that there's this kind of limitation on range on the Earth? Any ideas?
Just type in your answers into the question box and I'll relay them.
Cool, that'd be good. And there is another
couple answers coming in. So we got a couple answers, both of them saying curvature of the Earth.
Perfect. Good. Does anyone get that? If you imagine, if you're standing, if I'm standing on the Earth's surface and I'm not even 2 meters tall, and I speak on my radio, and you draw a straight line away from me to someone else who's a few miles away, can you imagine that it won't be long before that person, the other, if you look at the horizon, there'll be the receiver, or the person receiving me, is going to be below the horizon after a few miles. I forget what the distance is, but it's not very far actually. So that's the kind of reason. Whereas with different types of radio, like HF and low frequency, they can bend. The waves apparently can bend, so you can get much better reception long distances. There is another thing that can stop VHF signals. Anyone got any ideas?
Yeah, we have that as well. Obstacles on the surface, in addition to the
absolutely. Such as what? Like what? What kind of obstacles?
Buildings and hills and things.
Hills, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. So it's well known that in mountainous regions like the Rockies and the Alps, you can get real dead spots. So that's enough of that. So you all have a pretty good understanding of the. Oh yeah, and one more thing that will affect the range is, what do you think? It's the strength, isn't it? It's the power. The radio in the airplane may have, I don't know what they are like. Anyone have any idea? I think it's like 25 watts transmission power, and yet the handheld radios we walk around with on the field are only like a couple of watts apparently. So you will note there will be times when you won't be able to speak to an airplane that's a few miles away from the handheld radio that you're walking around with, whereas you can with the base station that we take down to the launch point of the field. So that's also worth bearing in mind.
So
that's enough of.
Svetvan just asked, how about weather? Will that affect range?
Not doesn't affect VHF all that much, I don't think. I think, I'm just trying to think, I think static affects HF, lower frequencies more. That's one of the good things I think about VHF. I believe you can fly in a storm or in a real high humidity, high static environment and still speak quite well.
Right.
That's one of the advantages of VHF.
So even in severe storms.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's one of the benefits. Whereas lower frequencies are affected,
right.
especially things like So that's the answer to that. So there we go. Let's see what's next. I got it. Protocol. Let's follow up. Yeah. Okay. By the way, Dave, what happened to the animation on this?
I forgot to put it in.
Oh, thank you. I was playing around with it today, and I was hoping it would work tonight. So, okay. Maybe you can do some kind of little bit of conjuring tricks while I'm doing this. Perhaps you can make it work on the rest of the slides. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. So, oh, cool. There we go. What I wanted was for each line to appear at a time. So anyway, think before you talk. Basically, formulate your message. Think about what you're going to say before you. Brilliant. Thank you. It's clearer for me now. Formulate your message before you actually begin to talk. So you don't press the button and go, yeah, I'm going to do this. So get an idea of what you're going to say. Then you press the button and start talking. Before you actually do press the button, especially when you're changing frequencies, you get handed off from tower to approach, for example, as PPR holders will know. Have a listen for a few seconds or a little while to find out what's actually happening. There could be someone who's in the middle of talking at that time, or who's just made a transmission is waiting for a reply. So listen to make sure that you're not breaking into someone else's conversation. Obviously, this is common sense. When in busy airspace, keep transmissions fairly brief and relevant. And next will be use of phraseology at all times, but to be honest, I must add, if you're in a bit of a bind and you're a bit stressed and you're not sure of the absolute correct words, and it's really important that you've got to speak to someone, don't be afraid of using English if plain English if you really have to. But obviously you want to try and use the correct phraseology to sound cool, etc. Try and be efficient, which you'll get the hang of in time. Again, this is kind of important in a busy environment. I mean, if you're going into a big major airport and you're in a control zone or even a medium-sized airport and it's a busy, especially on a Saturday morning, a lot of training going on, a lot of traffic, keep it efficient, as few transmissions as possible. And finally, this is a real safety thing, which you can fall into this trap if you've learnt to fly a regular plane at a busy airport where you're fully controlled by radio the whole time. You can be forgiven for thinking that there's guys on the ground who are completely looking after you at all phases of flight, and surely if you do exactly as they say, you'll be okay. Well, that doesn't really always work, and we as glider pilots know, because we're such minimum radio kind of control over us, that the basis of our safety is just looking out all the time, watching for other traffic, because a lot of traffic flying around, especially out away from major airports, is VFR and GA, general aviation, and some of them don't even have a radio at all if it's an ultralight or home built or a small airplane, or even if they have a radio, they like to fly around with not actually speaking to anyone. So and with our airfield in particular, a lot of people flying around don't even know it's there. They're not checking their map carefully, so there's quite a risk that someone's going to fly serenely past without talking at all. So You've got to watch out for them. And that's basically our kind of attitude. Oh, no, this is fun. This is basically when people are sort of about to go flying, they like to test their radio. And this is something we all do at Great Lakes. We do a radio test, and we like someone to call back who's heard the transmission and give us an idea of how good the transmission is. And so basically it's, how do you hear it? The strength is basically the volume, if it's really faint or if it's really loud. The readability on the right is of course, refers to how intelligible it is. Can you interpret what they're saying clearly? And obviously the scale is based on your kind of opinion of what you think. Needless to say, it's like these surveys you get after you've spoken to a call center. They say, well, how do you rate our service? From 1 to 5, extremely bad, reasonable, fair, good, fantastic. So, it's the same thing. You just kind of, if you can hear it really, really well, you just say readability 5 by 5. Or if you can't hear a damn thing, you say readability 1. And it's anywhere in between the two. So that's it. That should take care of that. Now, there's no need for me to kind of spend a lot of time on working through this. This is something that we can easily learn, and I believe you'll have a handout on it. Basically, not only do we use this for our call sign, which is the obvious one, like November Charlie or Victor Charlie November, for example, the VCN. You can also use the phonetic alphabet if you try and say something to a ground station and they can't actually understand what you're saying, or they ask for a repeat again and again. For example, you might say, I'm currently 2,000 feet over Loreto. And they go, where? You say Loreto. And they go, what's that? And you say, okay, 2,000 feet directly over Lima, Oscar, Romeo, Echo, Tango, Oscar. That's it. So if you want to kind of learn all that, it'll kind of be very useful. Anyone got any questions on this alphabet? Shall I run through it, or you guys okay on it?
I think they're okay. They've got the handout, so that is something they would definitely need to study.
And actually, at the in the summer, when we kind of get you ready for your test, up at the field, up at the club, we can practice all this when you got used to it, and you'll get familiar with it anyway when you're flying, when you're doing your training, because we're using it all the time in our calls. So you'll have plenty of time to actually kind of try it out. So we can move on from there. We don't have a lot of time on this. Phraseology with numbers. Next slide, please. Yeah. Due to the fact that radio from an aircraft used to be kind of very, very poor quality, especially the noise and everything, the engine and the poor microphones and headsets, etc. So it's got better these days, but they used to have a lot of difficulty with numbers to understand what they were. So this is basically a kind of modification for how to pronounce numbers. So 0 is 0, 0. 1 is 1, pronouncing with emphasis on the what would you call it? The nouns, the adjectives, I think. Yeah. And so 2.
The constants, not the vowels.
Again, it's constants.
Constants, not
vowels. Is it consonants?
It's constants.
Vowels. Yeah, constants. Thanks. I got a mental block there. Yeah, I'm only on my second whiskey at the moment, so it's going well. So yeah, you kind of exaggerate the pronunciation of these. So 1, and then 2, and 3 is tree, like a tree with branches. 4 is like flower, I guess. Now, the two that they usually get mixed up on air is 5 and 9. So for 5 they emphasize they turn the V into an F, so it's Fife, like Fife in Scotland. And then 6, well, that's as it is. 7 is, again, it's split up. 8, I guess, is pretty well the same as a normal 8. And 9 is a good one. It's 9er at the end. So that really does distinguish the 9 from the 5. So again, you'll get used to that. So some phrases. Okay, cool pilot words and phrases. The first one is Roger. That means I've received it and understood. You can use that quite a lot for, instead of a read back, you just say Roger that, or Roger, I've understood what you have to say. Now Wilco, which sounds like a real good old Battle of Britain kind of phrase from World War II, and you can still use it today. I don't hear it very often, but I use it. It means I've received your transmission, I've understood, and I will do as you ask. I will comply with the instruction. So it's a really good abbreviated way of saying that. Now, over and out, over can be used on its own. I don't know why it says hi. It's not my slide, by the way. Over means over to you. It means I've said what I'm going to say, and I want to reply. Whereas out just means I've finished my transmission, I'm not expecting a reply. So if you say over and out, which to be honest, I don't hear all that often these days, it just means I've finished and I'm not expecting a reply.
The ha is because over and out, you're right, is no longer used.
Yeah,
right?
that's...
so it's I
remember it.
Not used it anymore. But that's because you're like me, you're an old fart.
Yeah, an old guy from the 70s, yeah, learnt in the early 80s when it was. And this is... the bogey is usually referring to an unknown. You get this in these old movies when they're flying the Thunderbolts around in the Pacific, or the Wildcats, and they can see something, a flight of airplanes in the distance. They're probably Zeros, Japanese Zeros, and so that's a bogey. It's a sort of enemy or unknown contact. Okay, what do we got here? Yeah, formulating a transmission. So when you make your call, your initial call, it's just saying that you use your kind of almost your full call sign, not the Charlie at the beginning for Canada, but the four letters in your call sign. And if the ground station's happy that you're the only one around with a similar call sign, he will just shorten it to the 3 letters, and then after that you can just continue to use the 3 letters. So that's all there is to there. Okay, the basic format of most transmissions is 5 things. You can remember there are 5 basic things. What's happening there? We've gone back or forward? Oh yeah, great. Right, so that's revealed what it is. Okay, it's who you're calling, and then your registration, and then the type of airplane you are, where you are and your altitude, and what do you want? What's the actual kind of request you want? And okay, on to the next slide. Oh yeah. In other words, again, it's just to simplify this, who you're contacting. So I mean, there is a reason for this, and that is if you're on the wrong frequency, and you're on the frequency for Pearson and you're calling Guelph, then they're going to tell you that you're on the wrong frequency. So that's one of the reasons why you actually say who you're calling, and then they can correct you. Identify yourself, who you are, so they know who you are, and what type of airplane. It's kind of useful because you could be a Learjet, or you could be a Super Cub, you could be a glider. So they want to know. It helps to let them know how fast you're going, and whether you're going to be doodling around in little circles like in a glider, or if you're actually whizzing through the airspace at 250 knots. That's if you're below 10,000 feet, or even faster if you're higher. And where you are and how high, so they can immediately look at the radar scope if they have it, if they're like center, and they can look for where you are and see you on the radar pretty quickly instead of looking at the whole area. And what you want to do. So again, it puts in their mind, oh yeah, he wants to climb or descend or alter course or something.
So Dave,
that's basically, yeah.
We have a question. What
Go
about
ahead.
contest numbers versus registration? Because a lot of people use their contest letters. They'll say, this is glider 59 as opposed to, Alpha Bravo Charlie.
Well, contest numbers for gliders really, I think, is for communication between gliders and the gliding fraternity. But if you're talking to, I guess it's okay if you go to an uncontrolled airport, but if you're dealing with approach or a controlled airport or ATC on the ground, the guys who get paid for this, I think you'd be better off using your full call sign.
So basically, then, well, I would think so. Basically, then, if I'm up in the air and I want to chat with Jim, for example, I could just say glider 59. This is Victor Charlie November. Where are you? Right? Because it's just kind of within each other. But if I'm calling an airport and saying, I'd like permission to land, or I'm going to, pass through a control zone, I would need to then use my registration. Is that fair to say?
I think they expect that. Yeah, they do expect that, because they can't really identify you from competition. I mean, they could in the end, but they can't officially identify you too well in the worlds of normal aviation,
right,
using the competition numbers. So I think they'll frown on you. They might not like it.
Yeah, they won't.
And
like
they
that.
might say, look, yeah, they won't appreciate it. They might actually say, what is your official?
What's your registration?
What's your official registration? You might get a kind of a very inexperienced controller, because they have to start somewhere, and they're training, and they'll be really confused by it. So that's why we have the two registrations on a glider.
Okay, so, and just to answer a question from Karen, she said, what is a contest number?
Yeah.
So Karen, if you notice on the field, you'll see some of the gliders have big numbers on their tails. So for example, Jim Miller's plane is 5'9", Drew's plane is 6'8", the Jantar, the Club Jantar, is L8, Lima 8. Back in the days when we used to do contests, you would have your number printed in very large letters on the underside of your wing, so that the ground station could see which aircraft was passing through the start and finish gates, because they did it all visually. So that's what the contest numbers are all about. And it's a shortened, usually 2 or 3 digit number that you put on the tail of your airplane and under the wing. And of course, there's W5, which is Dave and Drew's plane, because Drew has 2 airplanes. He has 6'8", which is an ASW-19, as well as W5, which is the PW5. So that's what your contest numbers are all about. Okay, back to you, Dave.
So, now, I was just trying to think of some comment about the fact that having 2 planes, not actually calling them the same contest. So I used to have an abbreviated call sign when I was toning banners. I used to just call myself Banner 1 or Banner 2. And then one day I was flying a different airplane, and I just called myself Banner 2 again. And they got really, they were really angry with me about that, because I was, they said, because they said, you're not towing a banner, you're flying to a different airplane. So you've got to be careful with these call signs, I think, basically. So this abbreviating call sign, I've kind of covered that, to be honest. It's the same thing. If you make your call, you on an initial contact, you use your, when I say full call sign, it's apart from the C, the Charlie at the beginning of it, And then almost always they will reply to you, thanks for the colors, I didn't know how to do that. They will, when they reply to you, they will abbreviate it, obviously, for expediency. If there isn't anyone else with a similar, because there is always a risk that there could be someone flying around with the call sign Delta Sierra Yankee India on the same day at the same field. It has happened. I mean, it's happened to me. So if that happens, they'll still call you always Golf Sierra Yankee India. But as long as there's no one with a confusingly similar call sign to you at that point in time, they'll just abbreviate it straight away. And so as soon as they do that, that's your cue to continue with the abbreviated call sign. So there you go. And you can continue. So that's basically the upshot of that. Now we're getting complicated. Okay, straight into, we got time for this just before the break, I guess. Overflying a control zone, you want to get permission or clearance to pass this control zone. So the first thing you do is to make initial contact. So you call Kitchener Tower. This is Golf Bravo Whiskey. And then you wait for the reply. That's, of course, after you've made sure that there's no one else transmitting at that point in time and the frequency is clear. And then after you've made that transmission, the tower, whoop, it came in from the side. So the tower will call you back, and he's already abbreviated your call sign, and he says, this is Golf Bravo Whiskey, this is Kitchener Tower, and then he's waiting. In fact, what they sometimes do, or they often do, is they'll say, this is Kitchener Tower, pass your message, or go ahead, but not always, so you've got to be ready for both possibilities. So you're telling them that you're over Guelph, 4,000 feet, glider Golf Bravo Whiskey, I'm over Guelph at 4,000, and I'd like clearance through the zone towards Conestoga. And so you wait for his reply, and he says, you're cleared through Kitchener Control Zone. He gives you the altimeter setting so that to make sure that you set the altimeter for that area so that when you fly along at 4,000 feet, you are at their version 4,000 feet as well, so that there's no difference. And it's telling you to pass northwest of the field, and there's lots of aircraft in the circuit, report clear of the zone. And all you have to do is, you don't have to read all that back, you just acknowledge. You could say Wilco, but I'd say Golf Bravo Whiskey. And then you're flying along, and after a little break, a little bit of time, you're kind of all ready to make that next call, and you just tell the tower, you say that Golf Bravo Whiskey is now 5 miles to the northwest, 4,000, and you're leaving the zone. And the tower will respond that he's got your message, and he'll tell you, he'll just say Golf Bravo, Roger, Golf Bravo Whiskey, and he'll say you're cleared en route, which is the end of it, that you don't really have to talk to him again. He's finished with you. He's happy for you to continue to leave the zone. He might say something like, continue your own navigation, goodbye, or something, but that's basically the same thing. So the next part of this will be uncontrolled airport, landing at an uncontrolled airport. Do we want to take a break at this stage, folks, or shall we continue for a bit?
Let me just unmute everyone and we'll do a quick check-in. Okay. So just unmuting everyone. You're coming back now. How are we all doing out there?
Because it's been a heavy session with that quiz at the beginning. I should stress stay on here.
10-minute break.
10-minute break?
So
perfect. Let's do our break here. I'll bring up my timer. Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave the uncontrolled airport diagram up so that
be studied.
Yeah, you can study that. There'll be a quiz after. I'm kidding. All right, let's
I'll do the quiz.
Let's all come back in about 10 minutes, okay? So I'm just going to mute everyone and be back in 10 minutes. Okay, 2 seconds, 1 second, beep. We are back. Now, I'll just need a few seconds while I unmute everyone. Where the heck did y'all go? There you are. Just got to find the right panel. I got a whole bunch of stuff open here. Chris, Dane, Jim, you're back. Oh, Dane, we're not going to unmute you because you're a noisy guy. So there you go. You're back to muted. Christoph, Marek, Neil, welcome back. Pavel, Roger, Ron, Sergio, Tom, and Svetban. I think we're all back. And just a quick shout out, welcome to Ron. We actually have 3 new students on tonight because we've got Roger and his son. And apologies, I had forgot to send Ron the link earlier. So I managed to do that in the background, and Ron has joined us. So welcome, Ron.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Okay, so just before I mute everyone again and we get restarted, just wanted to do a quick touch base and see how everyone's doing and if there's any questions. Okay.
Does anyone have any questions about what we've said so far, what we've covered so far, guys? If you can hear me.
No, I think we're good. I'm just going to mute everyone and then I'll unmute Dave and we'll be back in business. So bear with me 1 sec. Okay, Dave, you're back. And of course, if anyone does have any questions at all, just type it into the question box and I'll keep an eye open and raise those with everyone so that we can share those. And if you do have a question and want to speak, just raise your hand. And again, I'll be monitoring that. So Dave, over to you.
Good evening. It's me again to continue the second half. So we've got a picture of a circuit now. I know you've covered circuits and we're not going to digress into circuit planning or anything, but I'll just quickly outline the kind of the picture we have here, the different ways of entering a circuit. Starting from the left, coming from the left to join downwind. That's a pretty common entry procedure, especially at controlled airports. Or you can do what they call an overhead join. I'm sure you've heard of this, Roger, and any of you powered guys. Overhead join, maybe 1,500 feet above ground, from the dead side, i.e. the side opposite to where the circuit is, to join mid downwind. Or you can even join straight onto base. That would be from the bottom of the screen onto base. And even what some people do is a straight in final, which quite honestly is okay at a completely controlled aerodrome because they're cleared to do so if it's safe and everyone knows what's going on. But at uncontrolled, it's a little bit hazardous, especially when they're not communicating, because they'll just appear out of nowhere. But that is a possible entry procedure. So those are the different ways of joining the circuit, and there are 3, unlike us with the gliders, there are 3 calls that are going to be made to undertake the circuit. So before you get to the aerodrome, like 5 miles out, 5 minutes out, you're on the mandatory frequency. You just give your position, altitude, where you're coming from, and the procedure, like, going to be joining downwind or joining overhead to join mid downwind, or I'll be going straight into base, etc. And estimated time of arrival. And so then the next call will be, as you do, enter the circuit where you said you were going to be, you actually announce that you've done it, so that anyone who's around can actually hear what's going on. And then, quite important in uncontrolled airports, when you establish on final, make that call, because someone else may be in the circuit somewhere, they may not see you. I've been in a situation where I've been on final and someone's actually tried to take off in the opposite direction right towards me at an uncontrolled field in the States. So you've got to be kind of careful, make that call. I made the call, he didn't hear me, he had the radio off, so I had to go around. So there we go. Now, okay, So the calls, good. So first call, Guelph traffic. Oh yeah, you actually, as you're not speaking to the tower or anyone else in particular, it's a broadcast. It's what they call a broadcast. You're broadcasting to everyone around you. So you're broadcasting to who? The traffic. That's anyone who's actually flying in the vicinity of the uncontrolled airfield. So you're telling him that you're a glider, Foxtrot Victor Charlie, November, you're overhead at 2,600 feet. So then you tell, you make another broadcast to say, because that's actually the first one that you're telling them where you are initially, and the next one is your intention. You're going to be joining mid-downwind for runway 19. So they know what's going to happen, and who knows when it's going to happen, but when it does, you then make a broadcast to say that you are, sorry, you actually make that broadcast, you've made the broadcast that you are joining downwind, and then the next one is you're on finals for 19, and that is basically your 3 broadcasts, but as an extra little help for everyone, you're on final, you make your downwind, your mid-downwind joining call, you make your final call, and then you land. And if you're fairly good at energy management in your glider, you get it to roll off the edge of the strip to one side, out of everyone's way, and you actually make that call that you're clear of the active runway, so anyone else who wants to land is sure that the runway is clear of you anyway, and obviously if you're a powered airplane, it's pretty easy to taxi off inside. So so there we go. That's uncontrolled, where there's no one else to interact with. So Dave's doing a little bit of artwork here for us. I don't know if there's anything else I need to add to that. Has anyone got any questions on this?
So the extra highlight here is the 3 calls is really the kind of standard at an uncontrolled airport that is kind of the power procedures. At most glider clubs, we only do the join downwind, so we minimize it to 1 call. Actually, Neil, I'm just going to unmute Neil for a second here. I'm curious what you do in Winnipeg. Neil?
Yeah, we do the same thing in Winnipeg.
So same thing, just the 1 call?
Just the 1 call.
Yeah, most glider clubs tend to do that because we're going to minimize the traffic. And with the power traffic, especially when you're kind of announcing it ahead of time, well, my screen just went blank for a sec. When you're announcing it ahead of time, you're coming in from a distance. You're letting traffic know that you're entering the area. You're letting traffic know you're in the circuit. You're letting traffic know you're on final, because you do always have that option to go around and things. But in the glider world, we're kind of a little bit more committed. So once we enter the downwind, we're pretty much committed. So we just minimize our traffic. And most glider ports, we're not sharing with power traffic, because I did fly with a glider club down in the States for a very short time, and they actually shared their airport with a very busy power operation. So they actually did all of the calls. So okay, cool, thanks.
Ah, good, you've added it. I was worried that you hadn't added the Unicom. For those who don't know, I'm sure Roger knows this, Unicom is it's Universal Communications. It's a private agency. It's not actually part of their traffic control system. It's like an advisory service. It's fairly casual. It can be manned by almost anyone. It could be the owner of the field, someone in the if there's a flying school on the field, they might answer the radio, anyone who happens to be behind the desk, or it could be the owner, or it could be the wife of the owner, or it could be the 12-year-old daughter of the owner. Anyone can answer the Unicom. Even at our field, we can act like Unicom if someone is coming into the field from somewhere else in a powered airplane, and they make a call. They say, I'm 5 miles north of the field, I'm expecting to join. traffic information, please. And one of us might be standing there with a radio, and we can actually answer them and tell them that we're active, that we're using 2.6 left hand, and there's 2 gliders in the air at the time. So it doesn't, at a Unicom field, you may not always get a response. So when you make that call, you may not hear anyone, and you may just have to continue as a straight uncontrolled. But hopefully, when you call, you'll get an answer. So it's a bit like a semi-controlled airport. So it's a little bit of practice for that. So the first call you make, Guelph Unicom. This is Foxtrot Victor Charlie November with you on 123.0. Confirm the frequency, and you're hoping that someone's there. So it's great. So Victor Charlie November. This is Guelph Unicom. Go ahead. What do you want? And then we say, Victor Charlie November is a glider 5 miles to the north at 3,000 feet, coming overhead to join the circuit for landing. Estimate time overhead 12 minutes past the hour. That's really precise. Requesting an advisory, an airport advisory. So it's good. There's someone there who can tell us what's going on at the time. So the person on the ground will say, Victor Charlie November, the active is 19, and the wind is 200, so that's 200 degrees magnetic, or thereabouts, at 10, meaning 10 knots. Altimeter setting 3012, and the 3 aircraft in the circuit. It's good to know, so we can look out for them. We now know that we're not alone. So we're not sure if it's left-hand circuit or right-hand circuit, so now there's a good opportunity to find out. Just say Guelph Unicom, confirm that it's the left-hand circuit for 19. And we get the answer, Roger, Victor Charlie November, left-hand for 19. So that's everything. We've got our full kind of information. We're all set up to arrive. So, again, back to the, so that's the end of that. So emergencies. We're into another subject, the final subject of tonight. So far, any questions, folks, on where we've gone so far?
Svetvan just put his hand up, so I'm just going to unmute him. Svetvan, what's up?
Yeah, thanks for that. I was just wondering, is there any like unified, I'm not sure how to say it, let's say unified frequency which each and every airport, active airport, should be listening to? More to allude on that, let's say I fly to somewhere and I see an airport, I don't know what it is, but my radio is currently set to 123.1, whatever. So is there any mandatory frequency that I should know, and when I switch to it, they will hear me? Yeah.
Most generally, one's listening on either 126.7 or what's the other one? 122.8?
1234, but that's the common glider frequency.
That's a glider frequency. That's a glider frequency, but I think 128.
Don't remember, but what I would advise is if it is a registered airport, they're in the Canada Flight Supplement. So when you look up the Canada Flight Supplement, it will give you all of the details of the airport. And this is actually something that we in the glider world really don't do much with. And
because it's a big heavy book.
Well, it's a big heavy book, and we're lazy. But it's one of those things where because we don't operate out of kind of normal power airports, it's really not an issue for us, because usually when we're landing, we're flying into a glider port or a farmer's field. But if you're going to plan to go to an airport and you're wondering, what's the services there, what's the runways that are like, what they're like, what's the field elevation, is there
a guide?
Is there services at the field? Is there fuel? Is there someone there to answer the thing? All of that information's in the Canada Flight Sup, and if you take a look at the CFS, the Canada Flight Sup, you can actually look up Ronan Airport, and it will tell you, what our runway is, what our field elevation is. It'll show you the location of the windsock. It'll show you all that kind of stuff, as well as, whether there is a Unicom, and if so, what frequency it uses, and all of that. So you would actually do that. Now, while we're discussing this, Roger has chimed in and says, are CFS and maps required on flights? If you are going 25 nautical miles, I think it is, away from the airport. Sorry, if you plan to go 25 nautical miles away from the airport, or you're planning to land at a different airport, then technically, yes, you need to have a map. You need to have a Canada Flight Sup by law. Now, people carry maps. Most people don't bother carrying the Canada Flight. Actually, I'm sorry, no, the Canada Flight Sup you don't have to carry by law, but you have to have the airport information. So you have to have looked it up. And you know what, Roger, I'm just going to double check that. You definitely have to carry a map, though. And the other question that had popped in is, how do we know it's a Unicom airport? From Sergio again. Look at your Canada Flight Sup. So once you've got your license, when you start to fly cross country, you might want to take a look and picking those books up and cracking one open. If you're interested to see what it looks like, there's a couple of them floating around in the clubhouse. They're on the desk with all those other papers. It's literally a big thick book. It's about 4 inches thick. So I hope that answers it for you, Svetvan.
Yeah, thank you.
I've actually just grabbed my copy that just happened to be behind me on my bookshelf, and I've opened it up at page found B Bravo 995, Tottenham / Ronan, Ontario, and it gives it's about half a page, and it gives a little map of the airfield, very rough map with its orientation. And the roads beside it. It gives a reference. It gives the geographical location: North 44, 02, 32, West 79, 50, 47. And it just says operator. So its reference is that operator, OPR, is Mike and Cheryl Ronan. And it gives their telephone number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually one of the things I really like about the CFS is it usually has the phone numbers for the airport.
Useful information.
It absolutely is. So if you're ever wondering, especially early in the season, and you're thinking, hey, I want to go fly over to this, grass strip, and you can look up in the CFS, find out contact information, phone number, give them a call. Are you guys operating? What's your field conditions like? Stuff like that, right? And on the day, if you're planning a cross-country flight, and you before you take off, you can look in the CFS, find a phone number, phone them, and just say, are you operating today? What's your status?
And they'll tell you that, they might say, oh no, the runway's full of sheep still, or, it's all boggy and the tractor's stuck. So useful information. And yeah, what did we want? It gives, I'm just looking for the COM. So it says COM, ATF, 123.2. Are we still using 123.2?
Unfortunately, yes, we are. We're currently trying to get transport to change that
to 1234, eh? Or
yeah. So this is a quick example of what a Canada Flight Supplement entry would look like. I just did a quick Google search and found one, and in this case, it's Edmonton, Cooking Lake, Alberta. So there's the reference for the location. There's the rough map that Dave was referring to, so you can see there's that runway. It actually goes out onto a little bit of a peninsula here, so there's water all around it. And you can see, for VFR routes, see Edmonton VTPC, which is a type of map. You can see the COM information. You can see whether it's a lit runway or not, what sort of services it has. So I can buy 100 LL fuel there. I can get oil. There's the phone number. Right, so I can phone the airport.
And I might add, you no longer, I don't think you have to keep buying the physical book anymore. I think it's downloadable, I believe.
I think you're right, yeah. I should probably
and
look
I think
at that
you can get it in databases for iPads and VFR navigation software, etc. So it's you don't have to carry this huge thing around anymore.
Technology.
So anyway, yeah, that's great. Let's get back to, because we're going slightly off subject out here, aren't we, really? But it's useful to know because that gives you all your frequencies. So you don't have to stress about frequencies. You can find them quite easily, even if you don't have any electronic equipment. You just use a CFS. So go back to the rest of the radio sort of subject. So again, emergencies, we're back to our mantra, as they call it: aviate first, navigate, deal with it, and communicate. Same thing happens if you're in a dire situation. Still keep flying the plane. Try and work out where you are and where you're going to go, and then talk about it. So there's two different types of emergency calls. Now, the first one, the highest priority is Mayday, which is actually distress. It's grave danger. It's either you know, who's making the call, or the station calling, or you've become aware that someone else, another aircraft or ship or something, or someone on the ground or someone somewhere else is in grave danger. If it's now the sort of things that can initiate or perpetuate a Mayday call from an airplane could be something like the aircraft is upset in turbulence, you've lost control, the pilot's incapacitated, you're the passenger or the co-pilot, spatial disorientation, you know, in real trouble then. There's not much they can do on the ground, but they've got to know if you have structural failure of the airplane. So there's a very good chance you're not going to make it to a conventional landing. Engine failure, we all know about those, or even a fire. So that's the kind of the causes. There's a few of the many causes of a Mayday call. On the other hand, there's another type of call called a PAN, which is not such an elevated kind of level of urgency, but it's still an emergency. And that's the sort of urgency rather than a distress. And that can be due to, if it's yourself, you could be lost, or there can be, again, a technical problem with the airplane that you've got to land as soon as possible, but you can still control it, so you should be able to do a safe landing. But it's, you know, you really want help in getting to the nearest airport as soon as you can, and getting sort of, you know, looked after on the way down as far as clearing airspace, etc. for you is concerned.
Just as a quick side note, Dave, so
yeah.
you've been talking about making the call. So if I were to do a Mayday call, it's grave and imminent danger, something's really seriously wrong, and you know, someone's, you know, it's grave and imminent, versus a PAN, which is an urgency, it's an urgent message concerning safety or you know, ship or vehicle. What would you do if you heard a Mayday or a PAN call? You know, so I'm flying along in my glider and I hear someone else saying Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Well, what should I do at that point?
I would respond to them. I don't know, where are you, in the air or are you on the ground? Where are you?
Let's say we're flying along in the air and you hear some Mayday call off somewhere.
Well, if I would see, if I would listen to see if a center or someone responds to them, because I assume they're transmitting on our frequency. They haven't selected 121.5, which, by the way, is the international distress frequency that you default to if you cannot raise anyone on whoever you're talking to, or if you don't know where you are, you can just tune that in, and that's worth remembering for everyone in the whole world. You know, wherever you are, that frequency is listened out on, I believe, as far as I know, everywhere on the earth that's within range of any kind of facility on the ground. But if you hear the call on like our glider frequency, for example, or a mandatory frequency, I guess I'd listen for a little while to see if there's anyone on the ground responding to it. And if I don't hear that, I will reply to them, and basically with the intention of telling them that I'm going to contact the authority, whoever is appropriate. Like I'll tune in another frequency and make the call, or if I'm on the ground, I'll use the telephone.
Okay. So the other thing that I was always taught as well is you want to suspend other communication to keep the frequency clear, because basically if someone calls a mayday, they kind of own the frequency. So unless you're responding to the mayday directly, as much as possible, suspend all other calls. Right. So I'm flying around, and Jim and Carrie and I are, going cross country, and we're heading up to, Alliston or Mount Albert or wherever, and we're calling each other. Hey, Jim, I got a good thermal over here. This kind of stuff, and then you hear a mayday call. If and I agree with Dave. It's like, listen for a bit, see if someone else responds to them. If it's being taken care of, great. But kind of step back from the frequency a bit and give them space, right? So that you can only make absolutely critical, important calls and kind of give them some space. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether in reality, when that happens, if whoever they do manage to raise a ground facility or a ground agency, whether they actually, the people on the ground actually tells them switch over to 1215, or whether they keep them on. Say they're talking to Pearson approach. I would have thought they're going to move them to another frequency as quickly as they can, because they've still got to be able to deal with all the rest of the traffic coming and going.
They probably would, but I think that would also be done at the discretion of the situation, because if you're dealing with an airliner and professionals where you've got a multi-crew cockpit, then I would definitely say they would have moved them if they hadn't already switch to 121.5. But if you've got some guy in an ultralight whose world is coming apart, he might not even know how to switch to 1215, or just let's let this poor guy work it out without giving him extra workload. So
you would switch him if he's capable of doing so, but if he can't, then you just tell him.
So I would say if you're responding, I wouldn't bother asking him to switch. But it is, and 1215 is monitored, and there's actually a button on our radios which will switch you immediately to 1215. And that happened to me accidentally one day, and here I'm doing my downwind calls on 1215, and
oh dear.
Yeah, I know. So I got a response back from a very polite person saying, just to let you know, you're on 1215 emergency frequency. So I was like,
yeah, that's always a risk at in the past when I've operated at airports that happen to have the ground on 1219 or 1218 or something, and I'm thinking, oh, this is really very
really
risky.
close.
And it does happen. You talk to them, they say, yeah, we've had a lot of kind of inadvertent transmissions on the emergency frequencies.
And all the airliners, they're all monitoring 1215 all the time, which is actually really nice, because you think about how high they are and what their radio coverage is like. So if you do switch to 1215 and start transmitting, someone's going to hear you for sure.
Yeah, that's what happens actually. I very briefly I spoke to a guy in the UK who is an instructor, and he said he was flying a Turbo Arrow across the Atlantic, and he was just over Iceland, and it was a winter flight. He was doing a ferry flight from the States to the UK with this plane, and he was wearing an immersion suit and everything. It was night in winter, and the engine failed, and he made his call, and he was ditching off Iceland in the Atlantic, and immediately he got replied to by an airliner, someone who was flying transatlantic high above.
Nice.
And they just took care of it. They said, okay, we'll make sure everyone knows where you are, blah 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 blah, and they found him, and apparently he got rescued in 40 minutes. They actually found where he was in 40 minutes with a helicopter. At night in the dark, and they plucked him out to sea. So it was great. It ended really well. So there we go. So okay, sample distress signal. Again, we're going back to, it seems quite a complicated one, but it's kind of almost back to our 5 things of who we are. Who we are, and what's happening, and where we are, and what we're going to do. So we make the call and we say it 3 times, which is dramatic, but it does draw attention. Mayday, 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 and then the call sign, and then what's actually happening. We've got a fire, or we're going to ditch, or something. Obviously, I don't know if you always know what type of assistance to ask for. I don't think I'd personally think of saying that I would say what's happening, and I'd say what I'm going to do. I personally would try and give the position as early as possible in the transmission, because you never know. I mean, if you're on fire or something, or you've got a complete electrical failure, you might even, the radio might go dead before you've had a chance to finish your message. So personally, I would say who I am, where I am, and what's actually happened, like the engine's failed. Yeah, thanks. And something else I don't think of saying is number of persons on board. They always like to know this for some reason. And believe you me, because I have had a situation where I had an engine failure on a twin, which I don't really think it was a mayday situation. It was more of a pan. I just had to turn around and return to the airport that I was coming from. But basically, the first question they asked me was, how many on board? And, I'm thinking, yeah, it's kind of nice for them to ask. And my companion said, yeah, because they want to know how many coffins to get hold of, basically. So, yeah, and any other information, again, I mean, that's kind of hard for you to come up with when you're in a real dire situation and you're very, very stressed. But if you can think of it, that you give that. And then at the end of the message, you give your call sign again. But, in reality, when the right people hear your call and they start talking to you, you don't have they'll ask you the right questions. You don't have to remember to give all this information, because believe me, when you're really in a horrible situation in an airplane and things that are all coming apart at the seams, the last thing you need to really worry about is to make a really a correct call. You just have to give the basic information. You make the call, you tell them who you are, where they are, what's happened, and then they'll, as soon as they get back to you, they'll then ask you the questions that they need to know. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it's good to know the basic structure of this call that you have to make. So any questions on that so far?
No, we're looking good.
No. Okay, we can continue. Okay, let's look at the call itself, because we're getting sort of running out of time. So, as I said, you repeat Mayday 3 times. You say who we are. This is a glider, Foxtrot Alpha Bravo Charlie. Say it 3 times, and you tell them where we are, 5 miles north of Colgan, 3,000 feet. We've been struck by lightning. That's bad news. So there's 2 of us, and we're bailing out, and we finish with the call sign. Well, if you actually remember to say all that as you're about to bail out, you're a fine aviator. You really are. That's a lot to do, but that's basically what you're meant to do. So.
And hence back to the mantra of aviate, navigate, communicate. So don't think you have to make the call. Fly the airplane first, assuming it's flyable. In this case, it's not, since they're bailing out. Do what you can, and if you are able to make a call, great. And if you're not, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's just nice if you can, so that if you do bail out, they know they can come and get you. Obviously, because you might break a leg when you're landing or something, or get injured. So it's quite good if they know where to look to pick you up afterwards. So there you go. Urgency, this is not so dire. This is when there's a situation requiring a pan. So you say pan, pan 3 times. So actually you're saying it 6 times, aren't you? You go pan, pan times 3. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's correct. Pan, 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 pan.
Right. Just to make it. I actually thought it was just pan, 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 but there we go. I learn something every day. Yeah, you then name who you're addressing, which you may not always know. But this situation, you're probably not in such. You're not so stressed. So you're probably already speaking. You may already be speaking to an en route frequency anyway. And you may be having a rough running engine or a mechanical problem in the airplane, and you need to divert or land as soon as possible. So you identify yourself, and then you tell them what's going on, the nature of the urgency, the actual what the reason is for making the call, and what kind of help you'd like assistance, type of assistance required. It's often like, can you give me vectors to the nearest airport? Engine's running rough, I think it's going to stop, or there's something wrong with the airplane, I think the tail's going to, it's damaged or something, I can't maintain control. So you're just asking them for help, and of course you tell them your intention, say, I want to land at the nearest place, or I'm going to land at Buttonville, because I know where it is. So they can then take steps to warn the airfield that you're going to and make sure that it's okay for you to go there. Again, position and altitude, so they know how to look for you on the radar, etc., and whereabouts you are, and they can follow you. And finally, any other information that's relevant to the situation, and then of course you finish off with the call sign again, just to make sure they know who you are. So this is an example. This is a situation where you're actually you've seen someone else in danger, not yourself. So it's pan, 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 pan. All stations, all stations, all stations. So you're not addressing anyone in particular. Maybe you're on, I don't know what frequency you're on. Perhaps you're on the glider frequency. I don't know. Could even be on 1215. You're identifying yourself. This is Glider Golf Zulu Yankee X-ray over Lake Simcoe, 3 miles east of Barry, 4,000 feet. Good, you're high enough to get back hopefully from there. There's a boat below me sinking, and I'll stay on this frequency in position as long as possible to guide rescuers. So obviously you're pretty confident about your gliding ability if you can stay on station for a while. And then you finish off with your call sign. And so that's the structure of a PAN message. So any questions on that?
So I'm just going to unmute everyone because we're kind of at the end. So let me just. Yeah,
it's 8:57. How's that for timing?
I know. It's like you know what you're doing. All right.
Yeah, great. Yeah. I've nearly finished my whiskey as well.
So I think what I've learned from tonight is that we all need to buy Dave
CFS.
a bottle of whiskey. Well, no, I was going to say bottle of whiskey because if you finish your whiskey, that's just wrong. We can do without a CFF, we just can't be a whiskey. What? Say again?
Johnny Walker.
Johnny Walker?
Or Jack Daniels.
Mm.
I don't know, the new
Canadian.
The Crown Royal Northern Harvest is pretty nice.
I was going to say I like Crown Royal actually, so I've no objection to that at all.
All right, so just as we close off tonight, were there any questions on what we went through? And I know we went through kind of a lot of very technical material this evening, and thank you, Dave, for walking us through that. Again, during the
Can I just say one thing?
Practical piece. Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
Can I just say one thing? If any of you listening tonight are really kind of anxious about what all this radio stuff we've been through. This is kind of to prepare you for the exam, which we'll be doing all the tests, which we'll be doing later in the summer, by which time we'll have a chance to go over various things and practice some of the information. But as far as what you really need to use in reality when you're flying, when you're training and when you're flying circuits at our field, this is way beyond what you're going to be using the first couple of years of your gliding time or your career in gliding. You're basically only going to be making about 4 basic, different calls at our field in the circuit, and there's just 1 call per flight, and it's just going to be a downwind call, and it'll be almost the same every time, and or maybe a call on finals if you want to warn someone that you're there. But this is what we've covered is actually kind of a little bit beyond what we usually do, especially for local soaring. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, and Don Witten, who is he's one of our tow pilots. He's also a Transport Canada, or sorry, Industry Canada radio examiner. So he'll be walking us through this in detail. So what we wanted to do this evening was kind of give you a bit of a primer, a bit of a here's some of the stuff behind all of this, because for many of you, you've kind of hopped into the planes and been told say this, and you kind of stumble through it, right? So this is kind of giving us that background a little bit. Okay, so were there any questions before we sign off? Oh, sounds like everyone's good for the evening. So next week, I'm trying to remember what the heck next week is. We'll be back on Tuesday, same bat time, bat channel, and cover off the next topic. And we're getting kind of near the end because I think we have 12 sessions in total, and this was number 7 or 8. I think we're doing, oh wait, Jim, aren't you doing your cross-country piece next week? Cross-country and outlandings with Jim Miller next week, so that's going to be a really good session. Now that we've got a lot of the basics in, what we tried to do was kind of layer this in order. So, we started off with our theory of flight and, how to fly the circuit and how to work the radio. And so now we're going to go a little bit further afield. We know about lift. We know about the different types of lift and the instruments that are there. So now we can go a bit further afield and follow Jim around the sky as he walks us through some cross-country and some outlanding stuff. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to stop the recording here. Bid you all a good night, and we'll virtually see you next week.